All right, let's talk about cameras. Unity has a cool camera system called Cinemachine, and we'll just maybe use a little of it. We'll keep it simple at first. The Cinemachine is pretty cool in that it allows you to take your main camera, which is the one called camera, and if you want to have more complex camera work, then what you do is you create multiple virtual cameras. And then you basically use those as position and direction indicators, and it can tell your main camera to be at different places at different times. Probably for most of you, it will be fine if you stay with working with just one camera. But if you want to add multiples, I can show you how to do that. In order to set up the camera, and this will probably be set up when you get to your scene, I'm going to take the camera. Actually, I'm going to come out here. I'm going to right click to make a new kind of track. I'm going to make a Cinemachine track. And I'm going to drag this camera in it because it has a thing on it called the Cinemachine brain that's telling it to be part of the Cinemachine system. The VCam1 is a virtual camera that I created, and right now the main camera is doing whatever this virtual camera does, right? So I can move this around and it tracks and makes the real camera move with it. So then what I need to do is tie this virtual camera into this track. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say add Cinemachine virtual camera base, and I'm going to pick the virtual camera that pops up. It's going to plug it in, and now it has a clip. So now nothing looks like it changed, but what it means is that this camera is following this clip. If we had more than one camera, you could then switch it. So I'll just show that really quickly, even though you may not do it. Okay, so I'm going to create a new, I'm going to right click in the hierarchy, create a new Cinemachine virtual camera. It doesn't name it very well, it's a little hard. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select this camera and go to Game Object, Align with View. That will put the camera wherever I'm looking right now. Right, so I can kind of see there's a Cinemachine camera icon there. Then I could come back down here to the timeline. I could right click and say add Cinemachine from virtual camera. Choose VCam1. All right, and now what will happen is as I move across my timeline, if you look over here to the left, it actually cuts from one camera to the next. That's how the virtual camera system works. Now, if your animation, your project here only includes one camera, that is cool. I just kind of wanted to show how that works. I'm actually gonna, I'm just gonna delete that, stretch this out all the way. The main thing that I want you to actually then be able to work with here is to be able to animate the camera. And to do that, we're going to create two tracks. And again, these will probably exist for you. I'm gonna take the virtual camera. This is the thing you'll actually move around as the camera. And I'm gonna add an animation track. And I'm going to take the camera target, and I'm going to make it an animation track. Now what we can do is we can create what are called keyframes to record the camera and the target being in different positions at different times. So let's say, for example, that we wanted the camera, the virtual camera here, to move up and down. Let's say we wanted it to start here and then over time come down to here. I'm going to move the camera up to the higher position. And then you need to decide what time you want the camera to be in this position. So let's say we're going to start this way, right? I'll leave it where it was. What I need to do is go to my virtual camera, because that's the item I'm animating, and click this red dot. It starts to blink and it says that I'm recording. So I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to move it a little bit. And you'll notice that it created a little keyframe. It created a little diamond to indicate that it recorded the information about where it was and which way it was pointing at that point in time. Let's say I want this to happen over 10 seconds. Move my playhead to 10. You could put it close. You could also type in that number right here. I'm going to take this arrow and I'm going to move it down. Boop. You'll see it created a second one. And then I'm just going to click to undo recording. So now, when I drag my timeline, we have the camera itself is moving. Cool. We can move it to the side if we want to for the next bit. So I could come here, hit record mode. I'm going to rotate my view, Alt, click and drag, so I'm more from the top so I can kind of see where it is. So my camera is pointing this way. So I'm going to move it here. I'll move it here. Okay. And you can test it while this is going on. I just turned it off for sort of safety's sake. So we come up here and I'm going to hit spacebar. We're going to have this slow movement down of the camera. And then when it hits here, it will start to move to the right. Awesome. Same thing for the target. I've got the camera target here. Hit record. Right? And so let's say I want to take the target, and at the beginning, I'm going to move it here a little bit just to frame it a little bit differently. And then when we come down to here, I want to stay maybe with the character, maybe not exactly. And then as we move to the side, you know, maybe I want the camera, him to be framed a little bit farther over. Okay, cool. Hit and record. So now we have animation going on both with our camera and with our target object. All right, so now we're getting this cinematic feeling to it. If you want to delete a keyframe, I admit that I don't love the keyframe editing in here. So let's say that we wanted to move a keyframe that maybe we didn't want this to take 10 seconds, we wanted it to take 7 seconds. There's this little, looks like a little curve with two little dots on it. I'm gonna open that up. And you'll see that these are pretty similar to the colored curves that we saw when we were recording motion capture, and they indicate the animation information over time. So what we can do is start by clicking outside of these three dots and click and drag over top of them. It's kind of easy to select the wrong thing. So if you select and it's not what you think you want, just click over here and it will deselect. It's a little easy if you get a little too close, like here, it doesn't feel like I should be close enough to click on that spot. When I click there, I was far enough away. So make sure you give yourself some room, click all of them. And then I'm gonna start dragging to the left, but I can also drag up and down, which you can see doesn't just change time, but changes value. So if you wanna keep the values, after you start dragging, hit shift. So now I'm just moving in time, and so I'll move those in a little bit farther. So now that downward is happening faster. You'll notice it didn't change the timing of the keyframes for the target. It only changed the timing of the keyframes for that. And because of that, we kind of almost dipped below the edge of the floor, which is kind of an interesting effect. If you didn't want keyframes, you want to get rid of them, then you can delete them. So if I opened up this one, I could click and select all the keyframes at this later date or later moment for the target and delete them. And of course, that's going to make my animation look like here. It looks terrible. We're not pointing at all where we should because it's not going in the spot that we wanted to. So we might come back here, select the target. Don't forget to hit record, okay, when you want to make these changes and you want them to stick. So I'll bring this up and bring it over. Right, that's kind of interesting there. One thing that's also kind of easy to do is if you put the virtual camera into record mode, and then you go select the target and you start moving the target around, that's not going to record any keyframes. So you have to do both. You have to have both the right object selected here, not here, right? So you got to do the recording here, and then up here select the object that you're trying to record to. So half the fight with Unity is sort of figuring out where you're supposed to be clicking and where things are, you know, at any given time. So this here, I still don't like the position of this target. I really got deleting those keyframes really made it a little bit unhappy. And so here I moved it, but again, I'm not recording it. So I need to make sure that I go ahead and go back into record mode. And then I'm just going to move it a little tiny bit to record a keyframe. And as you can see, you can mess it up. So you might need to go back, delete a little bit more. Take a look at what you want to do. The camera is kind of low into the floor here. And so the nice thing is that you can delete, go back, delete, start again. We don't love to start again, but you know, hey, as artists, we don't always do everything right the first time. Okay, so that is the basics for the cameras. We have a basic camera object, and this curve here will again close this up a little bit. So we'll be able to animate it, move it around. For those of you who are interested in doing additional camera work, particularly cuts, then that process is pretty easy. Again, you make a new virtual camera up here from the Cinemachine menu, and then down here in the track of the Cinemachine brain camera, we right click and we would create a new shot from a virtual camera. And you can make it a couple different ways. You can actually, if you want to, just make a clip. Like if here I can create what they call it a shot. So it's a shot with no camera attached to it. And then if I select this, I get the ability to actually choose a camera. I could just say drop and drag this in here. Right. And then I always recommend naming these cameras. I feel like they name them kind of abstractly. CM VCam 1. So it's Cinemachine VCam 1. Like, why isn't it just Virtual Camera 1? Because what other virtual cameras are you going to have in here, right? They're all going to be Cinemachine virtual cameras, I think. So you can make those and do cuts in between them. And then, of course, these can have their own animation that you have to add tracks to for that. Okay, so that is the basics on how to use cameras. Next coming up, I'll talk a little bit more about different things with characters and also a little about lights and about sound.